Hi, in this chapter we will talk about method and constructor references. We will talk about this operator. While writing functional programming applications, you don't have to write a function from scratch every time because you have some pre-developed methods and constructors inside your classes. That's why you may refer to a method or a constructor of a class or an instance of this class. To access a method or constructor of a class or instance, you use this operator. Let me show you an example. Let's say we have a class named MyDate. You may find this class in the attachment of the lecture. MyDate class has a string, name of the day, a day, today's date, and tomorrow's date. Okay? And inside we have a constructor, and this constructor simply sets the current date as a new date and tomorrow's date with a method getNextDay. GetNextDay method gets the current date inside it and calculates the next day, the tomorrow's day, and assigns it to the next date. And getName method simply gets a date and assign it to day name. So when you pass the current date to this method, you will get the name of today and assign it to day name. So these all will be done when you create a MyDate instance with this constructor. Here, let me show you one of the methods. The first one is getNextDay. It gets one input and return one output. So this is a typical function, right? A function interface. That's why you may refer to this method with a function reference, because one input it gets and one output it results. Okay? It simply adds one day to given date and returns this new date, and the other method gets a date and returns a string. It simply formats the date and formats it with the name of the day with for capital E and returns it. Here you see another method, isWeekend. It simply gets an input and returns a boolean. So this is a typical predicate structure. That's why you may refer to this method by a predicate reference. This method simply checks that if the given date is Saturday or Sunday or not. So if it is Saturday or Sunday, it will return isWeekend. Now let me show you how we can use these methods inside functional programming. Let me create a class, MyDate class. MyDate example, let's say, a main method inside it. Now I will refer to this constructor as a supplier. How I can do that? Supplier, and it will return a MyDate. Let's say MyDate supplier. So how to refer the constructor of MyDate? Simply we can do that, MyDate and this operator and then new. This definition simply refers to the zero argument constructor of MyDate. If this constructor gets an input, your code will not compile because a supplier gets no input but returns an object. That's why you cannot refer to a constructor with some arguments. You may refer to a constructor with only zero arguments, no arguments, okay? Let me return to MyDate and remove the argument. Let's return this, and now I'm creating an instance of MyDate with invoking get method of the supplier and then refer it to my date. When we invoke get method of our supplier, the constructor will be automatically invoked and all of these initializations will be done. So we have the current date, next date, and the name of the day now. Let's invoke get name of the day method. For this I am creating a reference function. It gets my date instance and return a string and day printer. Let's name it day printer and import Java-util function. The only thing we should do is my date. If you control space, it will, and I'm calling get day name. Now we have a compilation error. It says the type my date does not define get day name my date that is applicable here, because we defined the input type wrong. It is a date. Let me show it. My date gets a date instance as an input argument. So let me return back, and I'm importing Java-util date. Now I got the function reference. Now I will print out the name of the day by creating new date. So this date will be a parameter to this function inside myDate class. So we will print out the day. I'm returning back. Now let me write the system.println statement. We will see the name of the day now. It's Wednesday. As you can see, even if we refer to a method inside myDate, we again pass an argument to the apply method, because getDayName method simply gets a date. What if I write an overloaded version of it like this? getDayName, and it will print out the current date. Let's return back to myDate example. In this case, this getDayName method should be referenced with a supplier, and it should return myDate string, because the overloaded version, this version gets no input but returns a string. That's why we supply a value, so it's DayName supplier, and let me print DayName supplier dot get. Now let's see the result. You see, again, Wednesday. So let me repeat the problem. If the referred method does not have an input but returns a value, this is a traditional supplier. That's why you need to refer it by a supplier. But if the method has one input and one output, then you may refer it by a function, because this is a traditional function structure. Here we use the class name, and here we use the instance name. This is so different things. If you write the class name here, after this operator, you should define a static method. You should refer to a static method or a constructor. Since our method is not static, you may not refer it by the class definition. But you must refer to a constructor with the class definition, since you don't have an instance right now. So you cannot access the new constructor with an instance. Already you are trying to create an instance, you don't have an instance. So this is so important. If you refer a method by an instance, this instance should not be static, but if this method is static, you should refer by the name of the class. These are really different things. Let me return to myDate. Now let's refer to this method. This simply gets a value, an input, and returns a boolean. So this is a traditional predicate structure. Let's return back. Predicate. It gets a date and returns a boolean, but we don't define the boolean because it's already there. And weekend predicate, okay, and refer it by the instance myDate is weekend. Okay, let's import this one, and we are able to refer this method. Let's test this predicate test, and I will pass an argument inside it. Let me pass myDate.getNextDate. So this simply tests this if tomorrow is weekend or not, and then sys out the value, run as Java application, and it's false. Now let me write another method to test if the given date is Thursday. Okay, I will copy this code, but this time our method will be static and is Thursday. Since you will try this code on a different time, the result will be different. True or false may be different, but in my case tomorrow is Thursday. So let me test it in myDate example. In this case I want to access this static method. Okay, that's why I'm referring the class definition first, and then I'm control spacing. The IDE helps me, and I will use is Thursday, and I'm able to refer this method statically because is Thursday is static, and I'm referring by the class name. Let me call it Thursday predicate. This time it will be true. It is false now because our method is wrong. Let me return back to there. We are creating a new instance here. It is wrong. We should use the date instance directly. That's why after creating the calendar instance, we should set the time by the given date, and we are assigning this date to our calendar. That's why our code is correct now. And let me try it again. It's true. As summary, you don't have to write a function definition from scratch each time because you have pre-developed code, pre-developed methods, static methods, and in functional programming style coding, you should be able to directly refer to these pre-developed methods. The method to refer these methods is using this operator. This operator may be referred by a static class definition or the instance definition. If you are accessing to a static method or a constructor, you should refer by the class name, or if you are referring to an instance method, you need to refer by an instance. That's all. In the next chapter we will talk about optional class. See you then.